Thanks for listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast, brought to you by DraftKings, America's #1 sportsbook app. Now, joined by Jason Shear, I am merely Mike Luke. All right, a lot to get to this show. You could tell we were both at Coach's signing day presser, Jason. And even though this class isn't rated maybe as highly as last year's was, you can tell there's a lot of quiet confidence in Jedd Fisch and what he's got right here.
Yeah, I mean, you could just kind of tell they spoke highly, and Jedd did say a couple times they're not done yet, but they absolutely I would say if you got the coaches privately and asked them if there's any guys they're just not very high on, but they wound up taking, I don't think there's any of them. I think that they legitimately believe that every member of this class can be a contributor.
Yeah, and, that's kind of the same thing I'm thinking. And let's just start at the very beginning, Jacob. If you could get Brayden Dorman's highlights up here, because the class kind of starts and ends with the quarterback. This is a big kid, 6'5", out of Colorado, obviously. They prioritized him very early on in the process, and Jedd Fisch made a point of saying that Dorman was the guy that they wanted to get from the West Coast, and they were able to get him, Jason.
Yeah, so, I mean, Jedd's going to take one quarterback at least every cycle. Doesn't matter how many are on the roster, and it's what he should do. It's a strategy I agree with. Dorman is a guy that they found early. They made him the top target, the top realistic target, and they love him. He's about as prototypical as a quarterback as Jedd Fisch has landed at Arizona, has a fantastic arm. He's mobile, even though he's big, but that's not really his game. But he's really good. I mean, he's going to fit the system. And Fisch was already previewing the quarterback competition. Once Jayden DeLore leaves, it's going to be Noah Fifita versus Raymond Dorman.
Okay, now let's get to another guy that we've got that would be protecting Brayden Dorman. Raymond Pulido is a very interesting guy. Offensive tackle right here, Alabama commit. And Jedd Fisch talked about him. This is a massive, massive individual. He said he's about 6'7", 315. And, with Jordan Morgan coming back at the left tackle position, Pulido's going to have an opportunity to start across from him.
Yeah, so Pulido's really interesting because they believe that his long-term future is at tackle. But if he comes to campus and he's solid at guard, they'll play him there to begin with because he's a really, really good prospect. Alabama signing an offensive lineman, and it was a legitimate change of heart. Now, Pulido wanted to be closer to home. Arizona never stopped recruiting him. Brendan Carroll went to one of his basketball games a few weeks ago, and they've been recruiting him ever since. But he can play guard. He can play tackle. His biggest disadvantage right now is probably the fact that he's unable to enroll early, so that might put him behind a little bit. But he's a kid where they pretty much see him. Once he gets into that rotation, he's going to start every game, similar to Big Jonah or, a guy like that.
Yeah, looking across the board right here, this was a recruiting class, Jason, that when Jedd Fisch talked about it, he said, if we're going to miss, we're going to miss big on kids. He talked about it too with, and let's talk about a guy like a Tylen Gonzalez. We're not going to run any clips of him, but this is a kid, just a massive dude, 6'6", 245 pounds out of New Mexico. And when he and Doherty were asked about Tylen Gonzalez, and not having a ton of other offers, he said he didn't publicize a lot, but he probably had some other options. Coaching staff loves this kid.
Yeah, so I mean, this kid, it's a fun story. So he committed, and I go to a coach, and I'm not going to name names. I said, "Can I have film of this kid? Can you help me get in contact with the high school coach, and I'll get film myself?" No, we can't. But I want to put film out there and get him a rating. Doesn't matter. Don't care about the rating.
Right.
Today, magically, now that he's signed, I believe someone posted on our message board, there is film that popped up, but he's not a social media guy at all. He doesn't publicize his offers. He had more than that. He had SEC offers in Pac-12. They love him, and they like him to the point where they're like, no, we're cool if he doesn't have a rating. We don't care. And usually a coach is like, no, you got to get this guy as many stars as possible. And Arizona's like, nope, you don't even have to talk about him if you don't want to. They think he is going to be a very, very good player. And the thing about him also that you got to keep in mind with a lot of times with offensive linemen and their feet, he's a basketball player, and he's a pretty good one. And that's something that often translates to football.
All right. Yeah. And look, is he going to be on the defensive line?
Offensive line.
Right. You're going to play him on the offensive line then. Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what he does, because when you look at it, when you look at some of his stuff, he's got flexibility right there where you could see him on both sides because he's just such a massive individual right there.
Yeah, I mean, and you take him, Pulido, Jonah, Wendell Moe, and all of a sudden you got some young guys that have a lot of potential on that offensive line.
Right. All right. Now let's talk about at the receiver position. But first, the four peaks. All right. Let me tell you about the four peaks here. A lot of people associated with the four U of A big men. It's not just the four U of A big men. It is the official brew of PHNX Sports. Check it out. Downtown location at Tempe. You've also got they've also got it served here at Tap and Bottle Watch Parties. Check out the show notes and the link in the description. Enjoy responsibly. Four Peaks. And again, always good stuff going on down there. And the Tap and Bottle Watch Parties. We're getting those coming right back up here for Arizona basketball, men's and women's. Lots of good stuff there. Four Peaks is down there. And Scott and Rebecca do a great job. We've had a lot of people. It's fun to go down there, yell at the TV, talk about a lot of different things. And so, again, check it out. Tap and Bottle Watch Parties. All right. Now, let's get to a few of these comments here. Everyone wants to know about Jordan Morgan. Jordan Morgan, tackle out of Marana, obviously was an NFL pick, Arizona's best offensive lineman this past year, tore his knee up. He's announced that Jedd Fisch announced that he's going to be coming back. Why and what was the process behind that decision?
So Jordan Morgan was going pro. He had told people, his inner circle had told people he was going to pro. He had surgery. It was successful. He actually didn't tell Jedd. Jedd tweeted on Friday night, if you remember when Flowe and all those guys were in, Jedd tweeted, "It's a great weekend." That was about the commits, and that was actually the moment he found out Jordan Morgan was coming back. So this news is only a few days old. I think at the end of the day, what happened was he is not going to be fully recovered and ready to play from the surgery until August. So he can't work out for any teams, and his draft stock is basically he's betting on himself to come back to Arizona, put together a really good season. There's a couple NFL teams, Chicago Bears are one of them, that basically said, if you put forth a strong last season, like we look at you as a possible first-round draft pick. Right. And so he's going to come back to Arizona, try to do that. And he's probably, it's figuring he's healthy and all that, it's going to pay off. He'll be a first couple round type of guy.
Okay, so that's a guy you could possibly look at him and Pulido as possibly being bookends. Again, it's not going to be easy, but there is that possibility right there.
Yeah, and you know what? Arizona's probably going to add a couple offensive linemen. Jedd Fisch said they have 13. They want to get to 15. There's a couple on the roster that I think may wind up leaving or some other situation. So they're going to get to 15. So I could see them, getting the transfer portal or going the JUCO route for two more. And I think tackle is probably the biggest position of need, not because of Morgan, but the other side. I think it's probably the offensive line position that's most open.
All right, he's not part of the high school class, but let's talk about Justin Flowe. That is the guy that obviously, and Jacob, if you could toss that one up on there. This is a guy who was a mega high school recruit. As Jedd Fisch said, the highest rated high school recruit to ever come to Arizona. He's going to be lined up. He's going to be lined up right next to Jacob Manu. Again, had some injuries at Oregon, but you could tell that Jedd Fisch was very, very excited, and I think expects him to be a big-time player immediately.
When Justin Flowe is healthy, he's a freak. I mean, we're watching the film up there now, and you see him just annihilating dudes. The problem is He wasn't able to stay healthy. Oregon fans love him. They just think he necessarily wasn't a great fit, and he couldn't stay healthy. This guy is as good of a linebacker prospect as there was when he came out of high school in quite a while. And the fact that he has 3 years to play. Right. So it's not like he's a graduate. This is his last chance. If Arizona gets the Justin Flowe or anything close to the Justin Flowe that we expected out of high school, they have one of the best linebackers in the country. I mean, the guy was just an absolute freak coming out of high school. He is a risk you take every single day. I would assume the expectation is for him to come in and start. And Fisch was adamant that he is completely healthy.
He's completely healthy. And linebacker, you got to remember, was certainly a position of need for Arizona. Again, we talked about Jacob Manu, but there's also, you got to have somebody next to him. I think this probably puts Jerry Roberts into kind of a reserve linebacker role, kind of a jack of all trades, which I'm fine with. but these two right next to each other, they could be some real problems. Speaking of which, I've had a lot of people ask about Leviticus Sua, where he didn't sign, obviously, with Arizona that we know of. But where does Arizona stand with the linebacker out of Mater Dei right now, 4-star kid?
Yeah, he's committing in a month. So January 20th, the Polynesian Bowl. I don't believe he signed. I'm not positive. And if he did, obviously I wouldn't ruin it anyway. But I really don't know if he signed. I think Arizona's in the lead. You got to assume that UCLA and Stanford are going to continue to recruit him hard for the next month. Arizona is. Who knows if other schools try to get involved with NIL and all that. But Arizona right now, if he committed today, I think he would have committed to Arizona.
All right, our guy Scotty Graham just liked a tweet that you were mentioning. Coach Graham, if you were watching, you are not a de facto member of the Back the A movement. You are a leader of the charge of the Back the A movement right there. All right, Game Time, the official or the best ticketing app out there. You can get tickets through Game Time for sporting events, concerts, you name it. Game Time has got it for you. And here's the deal. You can many times get these at 60% off. Again, 60% off. We've had people on the post-game show who've talked about utilizing this. Anthony Gimino has this as one of the apps on his phone. So again, check it out, Game Time, 60% off, and it's the best place for you to get tickets last second to pretty much all of your stuff. Check it out, Game Time. And again, show notes and link in the description. Best way to support us is by buying your tickets through the link in the description. All right. Now, let's talk about Genesis Smith, if you could bring that up right there, Jacob. All right. Kid out of Chandler. Interesting guy. Hamilton kid, obviously. 6'2", fits really well into what Jedd Fisch wants to do. And I don't know that he's going to start this year, but I think it would be a little bit of a surprise if he wasn't heavily involved in the safety rotation pretty much immediately, Jason.
If you ask me a member of this class on the defensive side of the ball, the high school class that has a chance to start, he'd be, if not number one, he'd be close to it. They absolutely love him. He was the top safety on their board, and they landed other safeties. Like you mentioned, if he doesn't start, he's absolutely going to be in the rotation. He's really good in coverage, which they haven't had in the last couple of years. He can come up and hit, but he's a guy that fits what they want from a safety in every way. And listening to the coaches talk about him, you can just hear it that they expect big things from this kid sooner than later.
Okay, now let's talk a little bit about just the size that Jedd Fisch wants to go with. And that's why I think it's interesting. Rich Rod was a really, really good coach. We all know that. Whoever got Rich Rod run out of town, though, we don't like you because that brought in someone. But the thing with Rich Rod, though, is that whenever he recruited, he was always bringing in smaller dudes. And that was pretty much across the board, whether that was at receiver, whether that was at line, whatever the case may be, that's what he was essentially doing. It's a little bit different now. If they're going to miss big. Let's now go to at the receiver position. Let's talk about a Malachi Riley right here. This is a guy who at about 6'2", 6'3", Arizona got on a little bit later, but because they had another priority in Trey Spivey. But I think I speak for the coaching staff when saying that they are more than happy that they've got Riley right now.
Yeah, the thing with him is, his biggest issue at the next level will be consistency. Sometimes he kind of disappears a little bit, but when he's at his best, he's as good as most receivers. I mean, he is a big guy, like you said. He knows how to use that size. He'll go up and get the ball over DBs. Really strong, hard to jam off the line. It's pretty obvious that while slot guys are going to be a little smaller, those outside receivers that Jedd Fisch is trying to land, they're all bigger dudes. I mean, we saw it with T-Mac. We saw it, if you're not bigger, you better play bigger. And he's got good speed, and he's a guy where, when everything's clicking, he's a really good player.
Yeah, now the receiving core next year is fascinating because you got Jacob Cowing, you've got T-Mac. They're obviously not coming off the field, but then you got Kevin Green, you got A.J. Jones, and you got a few other guys, and Malachi Riley, I think, can fit right in there. There is, as loaded as Arizona is at receiver, there is playing time to be had.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because, like, Arizona lost wide receiver Tretch Kakahuna to Wisconsin, and then we're in the presser and they announced that they got Carlos Wilson, who's really good. And so it's like they lose one receiver and they bring in another talented guy. that's one position where I don't think I'll ever worry about with Arizona, because they're going to be able to land guys with the numbers. They're playing they're playing Cowing, they're playing T-Mac. The other one's going to be up for grabs because Green was behind Cowing this year. So do they move him over? Do they bring in a guy to play wide like Singer did? To me, it almost doesn't matter because there's so much talent at the position. You're just confident that they're going to figure it out.
Now let's talk a little bit about Elijah Payne. Kid originally out of Nevada. He's now in California. Massive dude at about 6'7", 285 pounds. Again, fits into that really big build right there. Is he ready to play along the offensive line?
I think he maybe has to get into a little bit better shape, but he's huge. I mean, he's 6'7". He looks the part. I watched some film on his senior season, and he had a very strong senior season, 24/7. Likes him quite a bit. I mean, it's really difficult to play the offensive line as a true freshman, but Arizona has shown that they're willing to do it. And so if he comes in and he gets going early on, I don't see why not. I believe that he's not enrolling early. So that would probably hurt him in that regard. But he's a guy where down the line, I would assume that he's going to play quite a bit.
All right, let me tell you about Candlin. Not every kid has in Phoenix or in Arizona what they need to do to be able to succeed at the highest level. That's where Candlin comes in. Candlin.org. They help you out with all kinds of different supplies, and they help you and they get you to the point where providing you assistance or providing kids assistance that they might not otherwise have. So again, check it out. Candlin.org. If you can help, certainly help, because this is the time of the year where kids do need, that help, because not everybody is as fortunate as others. So again, check it out, Candlin.org, and certainly help if you can. A guy that was asked about, that I've been asked about, and I really don't know much about. He's been committed forever, and I have no clue what to expect because there's not a lot of hype, good or bad. He's just been kind of there forever, is Kenyon Moses at that safety position. What do you expect? Because quite frankly, I don't know what to expect, and that's not a good or a bad thing. I just don't know what to expect.
Yeah, I just talked to him yesterday. He's a great kid. He's going to come in as a nickel. So he's one of the guys we're bringing in, a couple guys to play nickel. I think it's a good position for him. He may have to get a little bit stronger, but good in coverage. It's a guy that Chuck Cecil evaluated and found early. Obviously, first commit in the class, stayed solid the whole way. They like him. I mean, I don't know if he's going to be able to play right away as a true freshman, but he's a guy that he could provide depth early on in his career, and they think he'll get to that level eventually, but he's a solid get.
Last year we talked about it, and it felt like there was probably 11, 12, 13 kids that were going to play pretty much immediately, whether they were starting or on the two deep. And that really kind of came to fruition, just at that freshman class. Heck, Jonah Coleman played, T-Mac played. You look on the defensive line, Kangaika, Uyagalele, Jacob Manu, Ephesians Priceock, Takario Davis. Who are the guys that you're looking at and saying to yourself, all right away, these guys should be on the field in a one or a two deep type mold?
I'm looking right now. I think Pulido and Genesis Smith, as we mentioned. Emmanuel Carnley, the cornerback, is a guy that I would watch out for.
Very long.
Yeah, Arizona has some nice depth at corner, but he's a 6'3" corner coming in right away. He's legit. Arian Parrish at safety, I like. Gavin Hunter as 6'2" nickel. I would watch out for him. And there's probably a few others. Tay Brown, a linebacker, has really good size and length. He's a guy where I think could surprise. And Keanu Miloto, the JUCO kid, you get JUCOs to play right away. And I know that they were impressed by his film and what they saw from him in person. Maybe it's not the too deep, but I would expect him to play some snaps. But those are probably the guys that I would focus on.
All right, now looking at the transfer portal guys, we talked about Justin Flowe. Bill Norton is a guy that people say, well, he didn't play a lot at Georgia. Georgia's a different animal, man. They put 8 different defensive linemen in the NFL in the last 2 years. Just because he's not on the two deep at Georgia doesn't necessarily mean to me that he can't contribute at Arizona. We back the A, but at the same time, we have to be familiar with where the A stands vis-a-vis Georgia.
How many backups at Georgia would be one of the best players on Arizona?
Everyone.
Right. So it's like the fact that he didn't play at Georgia means nothing to me whatsoever.
Right.
He's probably, look, I don't know if he's going to start. Maybe it's too early for that, but he's going to play starter snaps. I mean, you don't
Right.
get a guy like him. And Jedd brought him up without even being asked about him. It was like, yeah, he came from Georgia. Like, he's
Right.
good.
Duh. Right.
And he's huge. And yeah, I mean, I don't worry about that. You got to be a special type of player for a school like Georgia to recruit you to play on their defense. And Arizona doesn't have a guy like that on their roster.
Tyler Manoa, another guy, was a 4-star kid out of high school. I'm fine with bringing in the UCLA guys because Johnny Nansen is familiar with them. He's not going to vouch for them if he doesn't think that they could contribute. Manoa, just what do you look for Manoa right now on that line?
Yeah, and I asked Jedd about that. I said, look, he hasn't done much about UCLA and throughout his career. What do you look for when you bring a guy in like that? And they basically said, look, Johnny Nansen, Hunter Echols hadn't done anything really. And Nansen said, trust me, he's good. And he had a nice season. And this is that situation. Nansen said, let's bring in Manoa. He's going to play interior defensive line. And I'm telling you, this kid's pretty good. And they lost Keon Bars. They lost Parrish Shan. They lost Tank Wilson. They lost some other guys. So what's your worst case scenario? Your worst case scenario is that you brought in a guy that used to be a 4-star player in high school, and he provides depth. And your defensive coordinator knows him and trusts him. Your best case scenario is that you have a starting interior defensive lineman who reaches his potential for one more season and plays really well. To me, a guy like him, there isn't any downside.
Oren Patu, kid out of Cal. He's the one guy I don't really know what to expect because you look at him, he's got a pretty nice frame for a pass rusher, kind of angular, but a pretty nice frame. Played well when he played at Cal, but he just didn't play very much.
Yeah, it's weird because he didn't play much. And I know PFF and defensive grades, we kind of share the same opinion. That's really tough to judge, but he graded out well. He graded out as one of their best pass rushers in the limited snaps that he got. And for a team like Arizona that doesn't have or didn't have a lot of pass rushers, you take that risk. And if you can line them up in certain packages, even if it's only third down, like a Russell Davis, and you tell him to go in and go get the quarterback, having a guy like that on the roster is much better than not.
All right, a guy, Andre Veras, who you owe me a monthly membership for bringing over to Wildcat Authority. Andre Veras says, Jay, is there a position that still concerns you going into next season because of a lack of depth, quality that hasn't been addressed yet in recruiting in the transfer portal?
I think you could always get better on the defensive end position. I'd like to see them go out and get a proven defensive end, a guy that had sacks in his career wherever it was and, can get to the quarterback. Defensive line to me is always going to be the number one priority because the quarters and the safeties don't really matter beyond that. And linebacker depth. It'll be interesting to see if Nansen runs out 2 linebackers or if he goes with 3 and they decide to add more depth and he changes things around. But defensive line and linebacker to me are the 2 biggest ones.
All right, more furniture, morfurniture.com. All right, they've redone the entire PHNX studios, and when I say redone, they've done it for all size and shapes of people. Our good pal Jacob Franklin is around 7'3". He claims to only be 6'8", but whenever I'm around him, he appears to be about 7'3". That is just as comfortable for Jacob as it is for me. And again, all kinds of different furniture setups, great deals as well. Check it out, morfurniture.com. If it's good enough for Jacob Franklin, if it's good enough for me, it should be good enough for the masses, especially those that back the A. Check it out, morfurniture.com. All right, now let's just talk about it. This class to me is good. A lot of people, you get the naysayers out there and you say, oh, well, it's only rated 44. Last year's class to me was really the backbone on what everything is going to be built on. Because again, just look across the board right now. Your quarterback position is set for the foreseeable future. Your running back position is set. Your wide receivers, your interior O-line with Wendell Moe, Jonas Sabanea. And then look on the defensive line as well. You got your Jacob Kagaika. You got your Uiagalelei. You got your Jacob Manu. You've got a Sterling Lane. You got a Deuce Davis. You've got a Ephesians Prysock. You got a Takario Davis. I can keep going. That really, to me, is the backbone. Now it's about finding the biggest guys who they think they can develop that can fit in nicely next to all those players.
Yeah, I think they have a nice core, and now it's about kind of taking that to the next level. Like once you get that core, you bring in guys that you're looking to make an immediate impact, and you start to build depth. Because I don't think people realize. Forget the quality of the starters when Fisch came. The depth was non-existent. Like the majority, 95% of the guys that have gone to the transfer portal in Arizona, and yeah, there's been a few good ones, but 95% of them didn't play, and they were still in the 2 deep, and you still couldn't trust them enough to play. And so the key to me is using the young core that they have now and being able to build upon it without having to replace guys. They're in the replacement phase, and eventually they'll get to the depth phase, but there's still a little bit of that going on in this class at certain positions. But overall, the core is pretty nice.
All right. I'm going to ask you right now, Jason, over or under 7 wins next season, and you can't say push.
But I want to say push.
You can't say push. You got to say one or the other.
If you won't let me say push, I'll say over.
I'm going over as well.
Yeah. I think 7's probably the number.
Right.
But I'm not going 6. I think Arizona fans, I mean, Arizona's better than 1 win better, if that makes sense. Like they should be multiple games better.
Yeah. All right. I'm going with that. We agree, though. We're going bowling next year.
Oh, absolutely.
All right. All right. Everybody out there, really, really appreciate your comments. We got up to 71 lives for this at 4:00. That is absolutely fantastic. Appreciate everybody on there. Chad McDonald's, you know where to be in Vegas. Jason Scheer, you're the man. Jacob Franklin, all 7'3" of him behind the scenes making it work. I'm Mike Luke. That's Jason Scheer. Jacob Franklin, you've been listening to the AZ Wildcats podcast.